Hey, it's Kaylee. You know me as the Parts Girl, and I work here at PartsEdge. Thanks for following this awesome journey as we highlight thought leaders and trailblazers, share best practices in fixed ops, and cover success stories of how dealers sell more parts and service. This is the PartsEdge podcast with Kaylee Felio. I've got a bunch of questions for you, and the first thing I want to know is what has been the most immediate impact on this tariff percentage increase directly on auto parts?
At this particular point, none. The biggest thing has been fear. Of course, the manufacturers, if anything we've heard over the last few weeks, is the manufacturers have put the fear into the dealers that this is going to be a shortage issue. It's not a shortage issue. It's a tariff. It's a tax issue. It's not a shortage issue like being on strike and the depots are closed like GM went through 2 years ago. So with that being said, most of it at this point is fear. There are some facts coming up, but we can talk about that.
Everything that we're talking about is just kind of hasn't quite happened yet. It's all fear and just what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so from your perspective, how should a parts manager be thinking about their inventory and the cost and the increases of cost and everything?
Well, that is the biggest thing, is when these tariffs, that they really do take effect. And I think these tariffs, based on the current administration or whatnot, and talking with a lot of other people, it's kind of a ready, shoot, aim. I don't think a lot of these tariffs are going to be tremendously implemented. I think the percentages are going to come way down versus some of the speculation that's put out there. And we've already seen several of the countries that, have already negotiated the tariffs down to a realistic level. But with that being said, I did get something this week that, and this happened to be from a Mopar perspective, that Chrysler, FCA, is going to have a 3% price increase in May, another 3% price increase in June, and their B Pro maintenance items is going to go up a flat 7.5%. So that seems realistic. And with that being said, this is the most important thing you can do as a parts manager. There's been people who have overordered inventory and put some depth in. If you want to write the check and do that, that's okay.
Wait, question. When you're assessing that, like, what are some things you should be thinking about whether to decide to add more depth into the inventory? You're writing more of a check, but like, what are some questions they should be asking themselves before they implement?
Well, let's put it, I'll give you two different sides of the coin that I've gone through with a couple other dealers, both JLR stores, Jaguar Land Rover. One dealer, we had a great conversation about this, and they were ready to order $100,000 worth of maintenance parts to bulk up their inventory. And after the discussion with them, I talked him out of it because he had already added about $50,000 and went to a 60-day supply. And he wanted to go maybe as deep as a 6-month supply. And I told him, I said, okay, if you buy $100,000, and remember, this is not a shortage, it's a tariff. So if you're increasing the inventory because you're going to make, and I even said, let's say 10%, the inventory grows by 10%, and you order $100,000, once the appreciation takes place, you make $10,000. But withholding costs over a 6-month period at about 2%, you basically really just increase your inventory. And I would highly suggest they'd already done enough to get the 60-day supply. And we've had a dealer group that just did that, by the way. But, don't go any further than that because, again, this is not that shortage. Now, with that being said, then I had one other dealer that the dealer said, and this is buying into, and forgive the pun, but drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. He told me, he said, I don't want to be the last person standing when the music stops in musical chairs and everybody's bought out the depot. And so he ordered $200,000 worth of parts. So, hey, I wouldn't do anything like that in this particular point because your existing inventory is going to appreciate anyway. And if you want to put a little bit of depth just to be careful, I understand that. But, even the tariffs right now, Kaylee, they haven't been implemented, or, there's enough in the supply chain that this should be 60, 90 days out, depending on the velocity of the parts. I mean, we know it's domestic. We know it's import. For example, when I had some dealers I talked to that were domestic, they said, oh, well, thank God we don't have to worry about this. This is a European issue. This is, Italian issue or whatnot. I had to really educate them that, a lot of parts that come in the United States, about 50% come from Mexico, Canada, and abroad. So even on the domestic side, auto parts come from all over the world. So this tariff should be affecting just about every dealer. Now, let's back up, because this is the most important thing. If someone wants to listen to something and get something out of this that they should be prepared for, as a parts manager, these tariffs and these increases in your inventory, yay, good news is appreciation. But for a lot of you that are using menu pricing or grid pricing, family pricing, all the same thing, boy, you got to watch these appreciations and see if brake pads, oil filters, air filters, all these menu items, all of a sudden the cost of these increase 10%, you're going to want to make sure that you increase your menu priced items accordingly. If you sell it at suggested retail, that'll go with the increase in cost. Or if you're matrixing, that's different. But be very careful and make sure that you're watching your maintenance items to make sure you increase that sale price accordingly if they raise the cost on them. That right there is critical.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question, thanks. I had a whole section on pricing.
Yeah, out of all these tariffs, we can sit and speculate and and guess and hope and, all that. But the bottom line is the most prudent thing you could do as a parts manager, whether you put 60-day supply in or anything, is really review that appreciation report each month to see what is increasing, especially on parts where you're selling at menu pricing.
Okay, so parts managers reviewing their appreciation report and they see it fluctuating or where they need to make changes.
You bet.
Where do they go to do that?
Well, they run an appreciation depreciation report, which that comes out after the price update tape all the time, depending on, what dealership you're working with. And then, look at the part numbers, and usually it's sorted by part number, but, review, let's say you're a GM dealer and, 1.836 oil filters. And all of a sudden you happen to look at all your oil filters and notice that the price just increased 10 or 15%. Now you need to go look at what your fixed price is and increase that accordingly to maintain your gross. Using that as one specific area. Brake pads, air filters, the dealers, you guys know what your menu pricing is through your service department. This is going to be a time that you may have to go in and increase these maintenance items to maintain gross. To me, that is going to be the most significant thing that a dealer can do.
What are some other things that you would like to add about just kind of what parts managers should do to forward think? Do you think this is going to be the new norm, or is this a new era?
Yeah, we went through COVID. We went through shortages. this is just the flavor of the next couple of months. I think, you know, I think things are going to calm down significantly in the next 60 days. Are there going to be somewhere between 3 to 10% increases? Yeah. Is it going to be long lasting? No. One of the articles that I did see, which kind of shed some light on this, was, and it just, you know, you do one thing and it creates another problem. For the manufacturers, this is a great opportunity to scare the dealers into carrying more inventory. They would love to sell more inventory. More than likely through this tariff scare, they're having record sales because some dealers have bought more inventory. But the reality is, as you look at this, and this is the thing to think about, and as things calm down, is just maintaining don't go with the fear factor. Look at the overall profitability. And this is the article with Fox that I thought came out in Fox News, but it made all the sense in the world. They talked about the problem that you're really going to run into. And this is the administration and, the business people talking to the administration, and they're asking not to place tariffs on automotive parts and automobiles, especially automotive parts. Now, think about this. Increasing these automotive parts, let's say 10%, it just is going to become 10 to 15% more expensive to repair your vehicle. You're basically going to sale-proof or repair-proof your car. How many people won't be able to afford an automotive repair and they push their car off to the side? That's something to think about. And that's something that was actually brought up by an economist to the administration in this article. And I thought that carried a lot of weight about trying to control repair costs because they're already pretty high.
Yeah, they are. It's a lot. And I think in the last few years too, haven't the stats increased that people are holding on to their vehicles for 13, 15 years now?
You bet.
Yeah.
But remember,
Used to.
this isn't just a dealership problem. This also goes back to the automotive aftermarket. They get their parts from Mexico, Canada, everywhere else. So, now you got independent repair shops. You're going to pay 10 or 15% more to get your vehicle repaired there as well. So that's why this article was just talking about a need to slow down or bypass the tariffs, exempt them on automobiles and automotive parts. That's what the Economist was bringing up. And I thought that was a really great article and, something to really think about. And basically, from what I hear, the administration is looking to exempt some of those things. Right now you hear if this parts manager's right, and we shall see come May Day, we're only next week, you're going to hit May Day, and, the May Day call should be, go look at my depreciation report and see how much my inventory increased. That's coming. We're going to see that in about 5 days. So, then we'll really see what the impact is. This might be a great excuse for some of the manufacturers to kick it up 3 to 5%, even if the tariffs are bypassed. We certainly have seen that through COVID. The cost of getting goods went up, but the manufacturers, and I'm not trying to pick on them. It's just reality. They're looking for a way to get money back, in certain areas too. And maybe this is a good excuse to jack that up anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wanted to ask you, everyone knows, I think historically, that the parts department tends to get left behind and no one really pays attention to the parts department. Do you think that with this, everything that's going on, there is a bigger opportunity for dealers and to make more profit in fixed ops, particularly in their parts inventory? Or, I guess my question is like, should they be focusing more on this even more? Because, yes, parts is important, but this is to kind of taking it even further, that it's even more important to look at this and what you're spending and the cost.
Well, I mean, you could go out and put some pretty great advertising together at the dealership level going, come get your car fixed now before the tariffs kick in, and get people flooding in to get their oil changes and things like that. And God only knows, some people have probably thought about that. But again, this isn't a labor issue, and this isn't a shortage issue. And there are opportunities through whatever appreciation shows up. You know, number one, by far, make sure you maintain your grosses, because we've seen way too many times where even through COVID and the appreciation increases and whatnot, that dealerships allowed their menu priced items to stay stagnant, yet the cost was going up and their gross profit shrunk because they didn't, continue to pass on or increase the menu items. That's the first thing. And number two, utilizing this, rather than pay the taxes on all this appreciation, talk with your CPA and consider taking some of this increased appreciation to try and sell off or purge obsolete inventory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you can purge it and have a cleaner inventory, then you can turn your inventory faster and make more profit, right?
Opens more space on the shelves for the stuff that is making a profit. There you
Absolutely.
go.
Yeah. So to wrap up, I wanted to ask you, co-founder of PartsEdge, how do you see tools like PartsEdge evolving to help dealers thrive in this kind of economic environment?
Uh, well, first off, back to number one, menu pricing. Looking at your customer pay sales and where you're making your grosses and where you're making very low grosses to try and increase that. I think that's going to be really critical. That's where we certainly can help analyze and look at low gross parts to try and help that, be more effective. From an inventory standpoint, working on what you're going to do with that appreciation. Do you go through parts brokers or whatnot before you just take it and try and purge it? Those are ideas and consulting work that we do all the time.
Is there anything that you want to add, just looking ahead on anything that parts managers could do?
Now, we too will weather this storm. They will. Just being prudent to maintain, those grosses, that's critical. Just keep your eyes wide open and make sure you get through this. And that, if you don't pay attention, your grosses will go down. It's just that simple. And, paying attention, keeping an eye on it, and making sure that you're maintaining that gross through this appreciation by passing on the cost to the customer. Unfortunate, but every industry does it. But in a lot of cases, some dealerships, and especially the parts department, gets left behind in this whole process.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you think about it, they look at that stuff with the new and used cars, right? With
Yeah,
appreciation, depreciation. It's the same
sure.
thing with parts.
You bet. Buy low, sell high, and, that's Econ 101. But, especially in the parts department, that tends to be an issue, like you said, that gets kind of swept under the rug. And we've been through way too many instances lately where that cost of goods has increased, but the sale price hasn't been changed in several years. So, yeah, eyes wide open. That's the best way to say going through this. But
Yeah.
I think it's going to be short term. I don't think it's going to be as impactful as, it's like the Chicken Little effect. The world's falling, or the sky's falling. And I'm not really sure this, again, I don't think the sky's falling.
Yeah. Just one more thing to navigate.